I came over to see what was going on.
Would start laughing for no apparent reason, for days, even weeks.
They say sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, and today we are going to look at a not well-known story that demonstrates that. In the 1900s, on the western coast of Africa's largest lake, called Lake Victoria, was a country called Tanganyika, which shares a border with the country of Uganda. In January of 1962, in Tanganyika was a remote town near the village of Kashasha called Bukoba, which is 25 miles away from Kashasha. Within the village of Kashasha was a small British mission-run all-girls boarding school consisting of 159 girls aged between 12 to 18 years, including the headmistress and other female teaching staff and also the non-teaching staff. In the boarding house, the girls lived in dormitories where they were grouped and lived according to their age. It was a typical school day for the group of girls on the 30th of January 1962. It was a bright sunny day and the atmosphere was filled with different activities. As the morning lecture went by, and with the teachers coming in and out to teach the young students who were learning, everything seemed normal at first, until it wasn't. Peeking into the afternoon were 3 girl students who seemed to be friends, shouting and laughing in response to a cheeky joke told by one of them. In response to the hilarious joke, one of the girls then started to laugh, and then the second girl within the group of 3 started laughing, while the third girl, in a friendly response, also started to laugh with her other 2 friends. Now at this point, the other classmates, on seeing this series of laughter, turned to look at the 3 girls, and with some of them smiling, while some kept wondering what the joke was all about. But 5 minutes went by, and the 3 girls were still laughing. 15 minutes went by, and to the astonishment of everyone around the small group of 20-something students within the class, they were still laughing. As the teacher walked in to conduct the students in preparation for another class, the female teacher saw the 3 girls laughing, and at first, she wasn't concerned, but soon, she would eventually tell the 3 young girls to stop so they could continue with their classes. But surprisingly for the teacher, the 3 girls didn't seem to make an effort to call it off. More teachers who saw what was happening would come into the class, where they saw what the other teacher and the students had just seen. They tried their best to help stop the laughter, which now seemed to disrupt the activities of the day. But the 3 young ladies wouldn't budge. They kept on laughing. In response, the group of teachers began to usher threats of different punishment, warning them to stop. But these 3 young ladies, instead of stopping, seemed to rather increase the laughter. 15 minutes turned to an hour, and the girls who were still laughing uncontrollably were shown out of the class, and no matter how much they tried to stop, it was like they just couldn't stop laughing. But of course, this would stop after a brief moment, only to continue just a few minutes or hours later. Over the following day, during another class session, something strange would happen again. The fit of giggles among the 3 girls continued, but at that moment, another classmate who was present looked at them and soon burst out laughing. Then, as one of the classmates saw the girl in front of her laughing, she too also exploded with laughter, then followed by another who was behind, and then another who was behind, and another, and another. And the laughter quickly spread throughout the class that no one could stop. During a short break, as some of those who had been affected in this class met with other students in different classes, soon it spread to other nearby classes. After the initial laughing outbreak, which lasted for roughly 48 hours, the school authorities didn't know what to make of this, but eventually the school continued with the hope that it dies out soon. As the puzzled teachers and the headmistress couldn't seem to control these girls anymore, they continued observing the affected ones in total astonishment and started wondering what could have brought about this strange incident. But at the same time, they noticed that the students seemed restless, alternating between uncontrollable laughter and then sobbing that lasted from a few minutes to a few hours at a time, to together with laughter and crying. Some of the girls also experienced other symptoms like physical pain, restlessness, respiratory problems, fainting, feelings of pressure on the chest, difficulty in breathing, facial tics, including rashes throughout most of the day. Interestingly, the laughing infection didn't spread among the school teachers, which included 2 white and 3 black African teachers, including other non-teaching staff within the boarding school. It had spread mainly within the young girls. Over the following months, doctors around the region were invited by the school headmistress and teachers. They ran a battery of medical tests on the victims with the hope of finding the cause of all the amusement. But no explanation emerged, as no apparent diagnosis could be reached. The strange laughing infection never stopped, as it continued to spread to other students, and with the symptoms lasting from a few hours to around 16 days, averaging around 7 days. Medical tests continued, but didn't yield much result, with the teachers now very disturbed since the affected students were not able to concentrate during most of their lesson periods, even after a brief moment of recovery. In total, 95 of the 159 girls in the boarding school would go on to be infected, which is nearly 60% of the whole students who experienced this rare collection of same laughter. The school knew they couldn't risk it anymore, so they gave up and were forced to close roughly 7 weeks after it started, which was on the 18th of March 1962, to prevent further infection. As the parents of the girl, who were now forced to take their daughters home after hearing the news, came that evening to fetch them from the school to their respective homes, something more bizarre would begin to unfold. Within minutes of some parents, either still within the school or just outside the 4 walls of the school, some of the staffs and parents heard very loud laughter around them, only to look around in astonishment as they saw a parent laughing uncontrollably too, and then another parent, and soon more parents, and their girl child joined in the frenzy as they traveled to their respective destinations. The school gradually became empty, and the authorities in the school, who were still puzzled at what they had witnessed for almost the last 2 months, would breathe a sigh of relief, thinking that this mysterious laughter would stop after a certain amount of time when the students were no longer mixed with each other. However, little did they know that the mysterious happenings around them was just the beginning of a long-year nightmare, and not just for the school, but also for the villagers. Before you finish the video, I would like to say that if you're a lover of disturbing, dark and mysteriously spooky true life horror stories, then you might consider doing all those lovely YouTube stuff on screen right now, as it truly helps the channel in making more videos like this. And with that said, let's get back into the story. Over the following months of April and May 1962, when the girls were now out into their respective communities within the country, just about 10 days after the school was closed unexpectedly for the first time, something totally opposite to what the school had expected would be a control to the mysterious phenomenon would begin to develop. 55 miles away by the west of Bukoba village, where several of the girls lived, was another village called Shamba. In the village stadium, 217 out of a total of 10,000 people, whom were mostly young villagers, would go on to suffer from laughing attacks over the course of 34 days. Young adult villagers that were infected were from both sexes, and the rest were very young school children. But a few older people, including men, also came down with the laughing sickness too, with the outbreak consisting of occasional attacks of laughter among these groups of people, occurring throughout the vicinity of the village of Kachasha at irregular intervals, and then stopping at some moments, and then being triggered again after a few minutes, hours, or days. It was just a random attack from all angles, with the laughter being incapacitating when it struck. Due to the agonizing nature of this strange sickness, some of the angry villagers whom were affected would go on to sue the Kashasha Girls' School for, in quotes, allowing the children and their parents to transmit it to the surrounding area. Even though most of the girls or their parents had, in one way or the other, suddenly displayed the symptoms of the painful laughter within their communities. But fortunately, there would be no fatalities, as the symptoms would gradually decline towards mid-May of 1962. On the 21st of May 1962, the school in Kashasha would reopen. But unfortunately, a second phase of the laughing outbreak would go on to affect an additional 57 pupils, and with the all-girl boarding school reclosing a month later, which was towards the end of June 1962. But before this shutdown, between the 10th and 18th of that same June 1962, the laughing epidemic had already gone on to spread into another school located on the outskirts of Bukoba, mainly because either few of them or their parents had earlier been exposed to the laughter when the Bukoba girls were released back into the community. In total, 48 girls out of 154 of them in this other girls' school would be affected. Additional schools and villages within the vicinity were also affected to some degree, especially another village 20 miles away from Bukoba. Specifically, on the 17th of June 1962, a student from that same all-girls middle school had been sent home to the village as she became uncontrollable from the laughter. Unfortunately, hers became worse, and soon after being sent home, an explosion of laughter occurred in her immediate family, which included the sister, brother, and mother-in-law. Her father-in-law, who walked 10 miles to see the condition of the sick schoolgirl, within a few hours soon suffered from the sickness, and which turned violently, mostly because he either tried to control or suppress the explosive laughter. Some people in the village were soon affected, and 2 boys' schools 10 miles away were forced to shut down. In fact, over the following months, all areas within a 10-mile radius of Bukoba, where, like I said, most of the girls who studied in Kashasha lived, would go on to be affected. A village in the country of Uganda, which shared a border with Tanganyika, wasn't spared from the outbreak, as on February 1963, about 60 students in an elementary school would go on to suffer the most severe outbreak and similar symptoms of the uncontrollable laughter that came with the various pain. It persisted for many months during the year of 1963, and eventually, that would be the last destination of the spread ever since. Surprisingly, during those happenings, other psychologists, doctors, and scientists who were called in were all at a loss for an explanation for what was happening. But in all, a total of 14 schools were shut down at the height of the outbreak, and more than 1,000 people were affected throughout a strange phenomenon which finally died off 18 months after restarted. When the story broke out, invited scientists who traveled to the affected villages observed that the mode of transmission appeared to be from one person to another. Hence, it was determined that a suspected virus might have spread through droplets. At the end of it all, 15 of the girls from Kashasha school who either survived the outbreak or those who were not infected had their blood drawn and tested for the potential virus. However, surprisingly, after some weeks, when the girls' blood results came out, all of the girls' lab tests came back normal. The blood that has been drawn from the girls failed to grow or manifest the virus, and no viral antibodies were obtained either in those who survived the disease or the girls who were not infected. Also, there was no abnormal signs on closer physical examination, and the fact that many patients had more than one attack during the bizarre happenings contradicted what was known to be signs of most infectious disease.
I came over to see what was going on. Children started laughing. They're just laughing. It is a crazy laughing, jumping all over the place. All of a sudden, there was an epidemic. Laughing disease, Kashasha here.
Thousands of people in the nation of Tanzania would start laughing for no apparent reason. For days, even weeks, it became known as the laughing disease. The laughter would spread from village to village until thousands of people were laughing in Tanzania and Uganda.
She trembled. They were just swinging, laughing with the so loud laughter. Like that.
We took all the blood samples, went to Europe to find out if there was a virus. You know, they thought about differential diagnosis. There was we say NAD, nothing abnormal detected.
So what else could have caused what is now known today as the Tanganyika laughter epidemic? At the time, there was a belief that the atmosphere within the remote villages had been poisoned, and as a result, had been like an atomic bomb blast. Hence, the first theory was said to have been brought about by tainted food sources. In the village of Bukoba, where the laughter epidemic created a huge fiasco, some believed that someone did put poison in the corn meal the students ate. At the time, maize wasn't consumed at any rate by the villagers, who ate a staple food called matoke, which is a traditional dish similar to banana. However, many schools and hospitals provided a basic meal of maize meal, as that was the cheapest among other food at the time, especially in boarding houses. But Kashasha school, where the epidemic started its spread, got its matoke bananas, fruits, beans and meat from nearby villages, where no cases of disease were reported. Maize flour for some of the affected schools were purchased in Bukoba but made in the southern part of Lake Victoria. But Bukoba Hospital and several schools that were not affected by the disease also used the same flour to bake their foods. The situation was also the same with nuts, as samples of corn meal and nuts were examined under a microscope to see if there was any presence of foreign seed contamination. An experiment was also performed to find a common food cause that might have a toxic cell that could give a clinical picture of what had happened. Water supply from rainwater collected in sealed tanks at Kashasha school, including rural wells and canals in small villages, were also examined. You see, at first, this theory was supported when all those affected were isolated to a single. But due to the fact that the laughter epidemic only appeared to mainly affect either the young children or the adolescents, and just very few adults had researchers stumped, it also didn't explain the hundreds of other people up and down the coast of Lake Victoria who came down with the strange symptoms, including some parts of Uganda who share the border with the country of Tanganyika. However, at the end of the examination, no dietary factor that was unique to the victims was found. No foreign seeds were found in the maize samples taken. Neither was there any sort of contamination in the local foods or water samples taken. Not even the slightest. And even if the phenomenon had been truly caused by food poisoning, still, it could not explain the spread of the painful laughter from one person to another. Hence, since the results implied that there was no toxins or environmental factors which seemed to be causing the laughter epidemic, more questions were asked, and strangely, many patients of the laughing sickness also said they were afraid of something, although they never gave any more information. Some even said they seemed to be afraid that someone was chasing them, a statement which puzzled researchers. Even though there have never been a previous record of a similar outbreak prior to what happened in 1962, among the researchers, there was a clear belief that this was an infectious condition of some kind, with one villager describing this belief as widespread madness, while some referred to the phenomenon as the laughter disorder. As evidence was being sought to obtain confirmation of the outbreak in the form of an epidemic, experts from various fields weren't able to extract any meaningful information from the affected girls in Kashasha school, and this was despite the fact that these different examinations were conducted by very well-educated officials. It just seemed that a massive outbreak which various villages had witnessed for several months could spread without any major cause once it started. It would also turn out that in another village in Tanganyika, where many families were attacked, a 52-year-old man living nearby would say to have seen some of the men during their own attack. He was very angry at seeing their suffering, and soon, as he returned to his hut where he lived alone, he said to have felt something or someone telling him to laugh, cry and scream, which he continued to do so for most of that night. But this didn't explain why the sickness mostly affected the younger population. And hence came another theory. Another theory from experts from around the world who came over to assess this bizarre epidemic, both at the time and more recently, would attribute the happening to be caused as a result of, in quotes, a mass psychogenic illness, simply called mass hysteria. It was believed that mass psychogenic illness often occurs in people who have little power to control their world or to express their emotions, especially during a sudden change in cultural beliefs. So the mind finds whatever way it can to release those fears. But what could have caused this mass illness, if you ask? And here came an explanation for it. The mass illness was said to have been possibly due to what happened in the country in the months leading up to it. You see, about a month before the incident, the country of Tanganyika won its independence from Britain, specifically on the 9th of December 1961, while the country had been a British colony for 4 decades. It was theorized that the powerful collective trauma that seemed to have occurred at the boarding school might have resulted from the students feeling trapped in a strict environment which was being run by the British authorities at the time. But although gaining their independence sounded like a positive step, it threw the country into cultural chaos, hence ushering in a time of transition and uncertainty for the people in the area, especially the ones seen as the lower class, which included some of the parents or younger population who were struggling either economically, socially, academically, or otherwise. There was also a possible explanation that the students being far away from their families for so long contributed to them being majorly affected by this hysteria. As this theory did suggest that it affected mostly the lower class, this seemed to also explain why the educated or well-to-do individuals weren't affected during that strange epidemic.
Congratulations to Tanganyika.
After their independence, Tanganyika suddenly became a socialist state, and the new government was eager to make changes. Local clans were broken up and land changed hands. Almost overnight, there was a huge amount of pressure to adopt Christianity and modern systems of government instead of the traditional belief systems and social structures that had endured for hundreds or even thousands of years. People were even offered money to choose one church over another. Life became very different all at once, and it's easy to imagine how stressful that must have been for everyone. Young people in particular were anxious about their unknown futures, and the turmoil happened to coincide with an overhaul of the local school systems that resulted in a lot of pressure on students to perform well, which must have stressed out parents too during the time. You see, it is well known in sociology that humans look to each other to know how to behave, and it's possible that the first girls who could not stop laughing, crying, screaming and fainting has just had enough, maybe of boarding school, maybe of the new order of things. Their schoolmates saw their uncontrollable laughter and thought, I feel like that too. However, over those 18 months of the laughter epidemic, people all over the country were said to have psychologically expressed their fear, anxiety, sense of overwhelming stress, grief and confusion through spontaneous laughter and other range of emotions that came with it. As wave after wave of the now so-called Tanganyika laughter epidemic shivered throughout those years, on the 26th of April 1964, so 2 years after the epidemic, Tanganyika would later unite with a semi-autonomous province within it called Zanzibar to become the modern nation of Tanzania. Sometimes a good laugh can make you feel better, but experts remain doubtful that the laughter epidemic that broke out in Tanganyika improved anyone's existential crisis at the time. It's important to mention that what happened in Tanzania is not peculiar to Africa, but till this day, with the exception of other types of mass hysteria witnessed throughout different nations' history, this one remains the only one of its kind to ever have been recorded. I would like to say that if you're a lover of disturbing, dark and mysteriously spooky true life horror stories, then you might consider doing all those lovely YouTube stuff on screen right now, as it truly helps the channel in making more videos like this.